from the 13. What was that for?
For this year's budget?
It would have been for last year's budget.
Yeah, for last year, that's when we decided to move over to 504.5.
Okay,
So,
that's like landscaping costs, or is
Well, that
that
was for
part
the-
of that 334 down here for the office? Like we took.
yeah, because if I remember correctly, I think it was 500 and some change for the overall cost of that building. So
Okay.
we've got 334 for office, and then 80,000 was projected, and we talked about that, I think in one of the council meetings, that we were gonna have to move money around to cover the cost of that 520. So
Okay,
that's
exactly.
That's part of that. Any more questions on buildings and grounds? It covers the cost of the parts of the 4 guys out of DPW and anything that we would do around, you know, miscellaneous stuff for DPW.
I see the wages went down a lot for full-time and didn't go up too much for part-time. Is DPW hiring right now?
Yeah, we just have a full contingent, but there may be some things that have to be cleaned up. So what had happened is we've lost guys with seniority, so they were higher on the pay scale. So the guys
Gotcha.
that we're bringing in will be making less money, so
Okay.
there's a difference there.
But you're right, though, too. The DPW has been shorthanded for the last several months
Okay.
with the vacancies through attrition and people moving on to other jobs and the hiring process itself. So, yeah, you're absolutely right on that.
Oh, the activity, yeah.
So you have no part-time expenses so far this year, wage-wise?
And I'll have to check on that, because the way my guys fill their time cards out, sometimes they have a tendency to just throw it all in one area, so.
That'll be part of the adjustment that we talked about, because definitely there has been part-time
Yeah.
work.
But we did have a part-time vacancy for quite a while this year. We just filled it, so he's only been working, I think, about 3 months now. And any other questions on DPW? Okay, let's take it back to the floor.
Next up, Chief Nurse.
Thanks, Brian.
Morning, Council.
Morning, Chief.
So the budget before you, again, kind of like, same with the DPW, there hasn't really been any personnel changes whatsoever, other than we're losing some. But we're doing our best to replace that. Most of, we're fortunate that we were able to replace our 2 lost full-time from our part-time staff. But now the hard part is backfilling the part-time staff, so that's a challenge. But that's not so much reflected in the budget. The budget allocates for that. This year is kind of a heavy year for us for equipment. The biggest things that you'll see in this budget, other than the contractual issues that kind of remain the same in personnel, is equipment. And, you know, inflation is an awful thing. As an example, this is the year, every 3 years, we get 3 new vehicles. And these vehicles run 24/7 for the most part, so they kind of get worn out. But last year to this year, the price of those vehicles went up 33% in 1 year. I've never seen that ever. It's insane. And then, of course, everything that goes in them, we can't operate a police vehicle without a mobile data computer, in-car camera systems, the sirens, the lights, the overheads, all of these things. A large part of our fleet didn't have overhead lighting, which in my opinion And I think also in our insurance opinion is kind of dangerous. It's reduced visibility, so it's one of the things I've been changing. Each time we get a group of vehicles, I put more lighting on it, more overhead lighting, they didn't have any. So the 3 vehicles we're getting this year, the vehicles that we're selling don't have the overhead lighting, so that's reflected in us. We're bringing them up to visual safety measures and all of the equipment that has to go into them, which of course, inflation has impacted those. So the majority of the increase is really just in vehicles. You can see that reflection, certainly. And what we do on that, we move them down. So I'll get really about 9 years out of a vehicle. So we move the responsibility of that vehicle down. So as we get 3 new vehicles in, those become the primary, because now they're under warranty. Hallelujah. And so those are our primary response vehicles, along with another one, the newest one or the better one of the older ones. And then those vehicles move down. We now have 3 school resource officers. They each need a vehicle for their responsibilities, of which the manager and I have negotiated a pretty good agreement. We've doubled what the school compensates us for the use of those vehicles. And they are the older vehicles, but they also still need the computers, the cameras, because now they're working with students in those vehicles. So we move those down, and then when we purchase new vehicles, the older, I've got some 2016s or 2016s that are pretty rough. And so those are the ones that we're gonna sell and get rid of and move everything down. And aside from that, it's pretty much the same. We had some big jumps in our dispatch. You can't beat the price we pay for dispatch, but it went up 10.5% this year contractually, and that's to everybody that contracts that service. And some other of the contractual items had some spikes. But unless you have any questions, we're trying to increase training each year. Training is very important because the 3 giant liabilities, or the biggest liabilities in law enforcement, are fail to supervise, fail to train. And we've drastically increased. We're in a good place with our supervisory. And what this training is also reflecting is good training on our supervisors as well. So we're taking them to an executive level training to make sure that they have the correct instruction as a supervisor, as well as the officers go into their continuing education classes. So that's reflected. And other than that, if you have any questions.
Chief, the retirement line is obviously the big boy here, and that's projected to be around $500,000. And is that the legacy cost we kind of spoke on in the past that you thought might be going down in a few more years, 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, the retirement is the legacy cost, and
It's about 8 down from,
yeah. And I'm not sure, I can't speak, I know we received some grant funding to assist us with that, which I think took us to the 60% mark, which is the state, that's state mandated, is that municipalities operate within the 60% of unfunded liability for debt. That's gonna be there for a little bit. We have more retirees than we have employees. And I hate, the only alternative for that is if they disappear, and we don't like that. But, so I don't want to predict that, but that certainly is an impact. And when you look at that, that's a big chunk of a budget. And I look at that as almost contractual. I can't control that. I can't do anything with that. But when you are so top-heavy in that way, that impacts us as well.
And Debbie and I were just talking about this retirement line because we haven't seen the full effect of what that state allocated money is going to do as far as our funding level. We know it's going to be right around the 60%, but we're hoping that it lowers our mandatory contribution. We make some additional contribution also in order to drive down. So, that's one of those numbers. We may not even have that number by the end of this budget year. So this is like a worst-case scenario, not taking that into account. And if we get some relief on what our mandatory contribution is, that will help. The other thing is, Chief Nurse talked about with the senior employees, as the senior employees retire, that's where your heaviest contribution is, even though they'll be drawing a retirement. You know, it changes what our contribution is because new employees have a different retirement system. They no longer have the defined benefit, as we've discussed before. They have a defined contribution where the employee can contribute some. We have a minimum that we contribute 5% of their salary, and then the employee can contribute, it's their option, and we'll match a couple of extra percent as a bonus to encourage them to add to their retirement. So, you know, those will help defer a little retirement costs also. But right now, retirement costs are very high, huge part of our budgets. And really, like Chief Nurse said, if you took the retirement component out of the individual departments, not just the police department, but all of them, all of those budgets would be substantially less.
And the good news is I don't have any, we are more top-heavy on senior officers. I mean, a lot of departments are. There isn't the influx of younger people coming in, so we're trying to retain our staff. But I don't project any retirements over the next 2 years. So that's the good news. I'm trying to compel them to stay even beyond. And many people do. I did that. In my last department, I stayed 5 years past my retirement date. And a lot of law enforcement will do that, and I've been encouraging our staff, especially with the experience and the community knowledge that they have, to stick around. And I'm getting some pretty positive vibes that that's going to happen. But there's nothing projected in our department in the next 2 years.
And you've hired a lot of part-time help, which kind of mitigates the rising legacy cost?
Well, I've hired some.
Okay.
We were very fortunate to get our newest SRO officer. The way that happened was a miracle. There's not, the pool out there is just, it's so thin. And unfortunately, in the past year, we rejected 100% of the applications we've received as a result of our background investigations, 100%. So I'm advertising continually, just for part-time. We can carry up to 10 part-time, and I have about 5 or 6, but I just pulled 2 out that are going to transfer up to the full-time slots of the officers that left to other departments. So we're trying. Good news is I got a really exciting email yesterday from a young man in Clarkston. So far it looks pretty good, so I'm going to be talking to him this week, but that's the challenge. I've been advertising, but there's usually about 10 to 20 full-time jobs open on the listserv. There's about 300 to 400 right now. So the pool out there is just incredible of departments that are hiring, so I'm competing with that. And I mean, we pay what we can pay, but we are literally the lowest paid police department in that list. What we're finding is proximity. So people who live in near our community, it's worth it for them to come work here and not drive an hour and a half one way to another department. So that's been probably the biggest influencer in the last couple of hires we've had. So I'm hoping as well.
I have a question. For our wages for our full-time, there's a $110,000 difference between what we budgeted for and what our amended budget was. Is that because we hired somebody new? Or
Well, we picked up another school resource officer, but that was under contract with the schools, but the school pays almost 100%. It's about 85%, I think, was that, or 85% of that the schools pay. So that's reflected in what we pay, but I don't have an officer on the street with that. So he's performing a function under contract with the schools, but it didn't change our police on the street patrol activity.
so can you explain then why it went up $110,000?
Well, that would be, I believe, for that officer, but then we get that money back.
Okay.
We've got to show in the budget
That
that
you're-
going out.
Okay.
And then we receive, I invoice twice a year? I think it's twice a year, the schools they pay for our school resource officers. As I mentioned earlier, a fee for the use of the vehicles daily. So we've got 185 school days, and out of that, I got 3 vehicles that they're assisting to pay for.
So both chiefs would like it a lot if we deducted from their budget when monies were received as reimbursements or grants, right? I mean, they both would like it if we reduced their budgets, but that's not how it's done in governmental accounting. So this takes into account all spending, regardless of the source of revenue, even if it's after the approved budget, that expense, and in this case, the new officer, which is over 100,000 a year.
Right. That would
gets-
explain the discrepancy.
Yeah.
That's what I,
Yeah, gets counted into expense. Now, in June, when we do the reconciliation of the budgets and we do amendments, that's when we'll show the additional revenue. So then you'll see that we projected revenue at X, but actually it's higher than we projected. And the reason for that will either be additional monies were taken in for the various funds, but the largest amounts will be in the police department area, or the general fund area, will be from the police department reimbursement for personnel from the Holly schools, because they were added after the budget.
perfect. And then just one more question for capital improvement. It looks like we did $5,000 for the budget last year, and now we're up to 12. What are we improving at the police
We
station?
have 2 very adequate holding cells. The advantage of the holding cells is that we have 2 officers on duty. If you take one away, now you've got 1, and if you have a domestic or other issues, it's kind of scary to have 1 officer responding to that. This allows us to use those holding cells. I arrived here in 2019, and those cells have not been functional since then. We've been trying to get them. We had some help that we thought was coming, and we were working with a private party who was had the abilities to do the plumbing and the rip out. None of the plumbing systems are operational in those cells. The floors have come up. This is a quote to finally get those cells back to where they're functional. They have to meet a certain state requirement, and that allows us to, instead of having to drive all the way down to the Oakland County Jail in Pontiac with a lot of, and more so, if we have individuals where we're having trouble with that individual throughout the night, it's not someone that the jail would accept, but we could lodge to resolve some issues throughout the night. We haven't had that option, and I desperately need to get that back for our community and for our staff. So this has been, I really hoped I didn't have to put that in, because I thought we were going to get it from a private source, but it just didn't work out. I don't blame that person at all, but or the several people, but we have to, in my opinion, we have to get those cells open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And there's a slight increase in our wages, part-time, well, not really, about the same, but down in the dispatch, those folks are also going to be the on-calls, the way our system will work for ourselves. They'll come in when an officer has somebody at 2 in the morning, because you got to have somebody watching them in the cell. So at a part-time rate, really ideal way to staff that on call-in at part-time wages, and then to be able to have that cell use.
So it's always discussion every year, and it's becoming less, but, why did we get rid of dispatch to begin with? So, I mean, if you hear that, I mean, the shorter answer is, there was about, at the time, $16 million of upgrades and improvements that needed to be done for the center. And so we looked at Oakland County, and if you see the total cost for the dispatch, really it's the cost of 1 full-time employee, and we're receiving 24/7 dispatch coverage. And so, I mean, we like having our own, but really for the cost of 1 employee, we get the entire dispatch operation covered, and alleviates that increase for replacement or upgrades of the center. So,
And there's also another side benefit of that, because we always have warrants, arrest warrants for people. Those have to be maintained and monitored 24/7. Of course, we did that in-house, and there's a lot to that. But they also provide that service as well. So all of our warrant activity is held, monitored, and responded to by the sheriff's office as well. Any other questions?
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
So next up will be Chief Watson. He'll be doing the building department first. He's really been looking forward to this. Being his first budget presentation, so be kind.
Morning, Chief.
Good morning, council. Thank you. Appreciate the time. So it is my first, so I may make some mistakes. I do apologize in advance. For the building, really, we spent $146,039.33 for last year. Next year, we're at $145,089. So really, we went down just a little bit. I don't see any increases with that budget, nor did I raise any of the line items. If council has any questions on the building budget. And really, that just pays for building department training and fees for the inspectors. Okay, no questions? That was easy. Thank you for that. Fire department, so there really were no significant changes to the fire department budget in line item 101-335-931-000. Repairs, building, and ground. As you've probably all noticed, our electronic sign, it hasn't been working since I've kind of taken the position. So to get that fixed is the main reason why that line item went up. And then also, I requested $12,500 in line item 101-335-977-000. I have 4 new hires, and I don't have gear for them. So to get them outfitted with the proper gear. And then the last one I have, $7,500 in line item 101-335-985-000 under capital improvement. That's for the 2 side bays that are attached to the main building. They don't have heat in them. So I do have a foam trailer in the one bay, and then our backup alpha unit in the other. Those bays need to be regulated at 60 degrees just because of the fluids, the pharmaceutical drugs that we carry in those need to be maintained at a certain temperature. So right now, we have to completely put all those, all the supplies and equipment inside the main building, and if we pull that secondary rig, we have to take the extra time to unlock it from a stored closet, grab it all, put it in the ambulance, and then take that ambulance out. So in the event of an emergency, time is of the essence, and for us to have to grab that gear and put it in the ambulance and then respond takes time.
So, I mean, just for clarification purposes, so the fire department really is the only department of the village and the only fire department in this area of Oakland County that operates on a total part-time employee basis, with the exception of the chief. And so, you know, it's pretty phenomenal, you know, to be able to operate that way. And of course, what that helps us do is keep the costs down. And just for comparison, NACFA has 11 full-time employees. And so they have 11, the same size, a little larger than our police department actually. And we have none. So I think we're able to do that because I think our part-time wage is competitive. Although we're just entering into union negotiations in 2 weeks with our part-time employees. The fire department is a unionized department. And so we'll see where we go from there. We're still going to be cheaper than having full-time employees, but right now we're able to do that, I think, through the different programs the fire department has in order to attract personnel, and then also the way that we allow them to work. Why don't you just detail just real briefly how many people comprise your staff? Your numbers?
So right now, well, we did lose a couple, but we gained a couple. So we're about 37 right now, employees on staff. We run 2 people, 24/7, 365. So We constantly have at least 2. We've been a little bit light with our callbacks, so when we do get a call, having people come back to the station. So I've really kind of emphasized that the last 90 days, that we need those people to come back and cover the station so we don't have to use our mutual aid partners. So with those 37, it's hopeful that we can get a couple more to come back so that we don't lose the ability to respond to our own emergencies. And of those 37, we actually have a few more of the new 4 people that we just hired. They are paramedics and fire, so they're kind of replacing EMT, which is a lower level medical licensure. So it's nice to be able to have more paramedics than EMTs, particularly for me because I'm still going through the class and I can't pick up that extra coverage. So it's an additional resource that we have available for us, really for the community, when you could have 2 paramedics show up on a call versus a paramedic and EMT. The event of errors or just having those additional hands for those advanced calls is definitely nice.
I see that we're saving about $14,000 on our insurance. Did we kind of shop around and change insurances?
No, really
for
what
the-
that accounts for is just the change in the personnel. I mean, previously, we had Chief McGee, who was another full-time, so you had Jeremy and you had the chief
Okay.
with that.
I'm talking about the vehicle fleet insurance.
Oh, vehicle, oh. I
Yeah,
thought-
yeah.
It's because as vehicles get older, they cost less to insure.
Okay, perfect.
Wait,
that's not good.
Yeah, well, which is a good segue though into a future topic for us.
Sure.
Just something to be thinking about. Right now, your primary response vehicles, apparatus, engine apparatus for the fire department, your ladder truck is 34 years old, your second due engine is 25.
1999.
So, I mean, that is something that, you know, we're continually investigating. Chief McGee and now Chief Watson, they both applied for several grants, hoping to get some assistance that way in the purchase of a vehicle. So far, none of them has panned out. So we will be coming to you in future meetings with some different options to look at replacing at least one of those vehicles as we continue to apply for grants to replace the other one. So perfect segue. Thank you, Amber.
I did submit one for 1.4 million to replace the ladder truck, and I did receive letters of support from Slotkin, Peters, and Stabenow, which is extremely beneficial when you can include with that grant application to have those representatives have a letter of support. So we do have that. It has been submitted. We've submitted a grant for $360,000 for community risk reduction and fire prevention as well. I probably have about 11 grants sitting out on the table right now that are just from e-tools, extra fire gear, gamut, right? If there's a grant available, I'm going to try to put something in for us, just because I hate to put it on the citizens or the community or this board, council to make a decision on having to take from another department. So I am diligently working on grants. And then we had the anonymous donation of $35,000 for the power load, which will be installed sometime early in May. We have the equipment, it's in the station now. We're just waiting for the third-party vendor to come out and do the installation. So monitor our Facebook, and with that, please like our new Facebook page. We had to take the old one down and we got a new one up, so please like that and follow the new page. I know that's not budget related, but that platform. If there's any further questions, I can answer.
Thank you much, Chief. Oh,
Running a fire department on 0 full-timers, can you see any disadvantage without throwing people under the bus? Can you see any disadvantage to that type of situation?
I think everything has its disadvantages and advantages, right? I would say the biggest disadvantage is probably being able to have a set crew, right? So on the Kelly schedule, so I know who's coming in, they have set schedules, availability, right? Especially getting into the summer months, people want to do vacations, spend time with their family, and, you know, I endorse that, I recommend it. That's where it becomes the challenges, or maybe the disadvantage, is staffing. When you have a full-time department, staffing is pretty much set in stone, with the occasional, you know, call-off or injury or sickness. But I would say that's probably the biggest disadvantage. But I can tell you that the village has been kind. We're one of the, in the scale of pay, medium, to offer for our medics and our EMTs, which helps bring in those people, because even though we are part-time, we still have a decent pay scale. So we can kind of sniper some of those other individuals from other departments that may be in the same position. You have to travel a little bit farther out of Oakland County. As Mr. Walker stated, we are one of the last few that are not full-time in Oakland County. So you're looking Livingston, Genesee, Lapeer area. But those individuals will still travel to Holly because of the wages that we offer.
But scheduling, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. Scheduling is the biggest problem. And really, I mean, I think that's the reason NACFA went to full-time department, is for scheduling, because they just had trouble filling the shifts. So currently, we're able to fill the shifts. Hopefully it'll stay that way. If not, that may be our driver sometime in the future also. But with it comes a cost, because then you have not only, the wages are not going to go down, so you'll have the parity in wages, but you'll have all the benefits to load on top of those.
In your personal opinion, what would be a number that would make it more manageable?
As in staffing?
As in full-time employees?
I would have to probably go with the 11, right? Because that way you could fill the Kelly schedule with the 2 and have still one person available from that roster that can do backfill, or in the case of an emergency as injury or sickness or possible death in the family, right? You get that additional coverage from that staff. So, you know, probably 11 would be the perfect number. But, you know, we would probably, depending on union negotiations, I don't know where they would like to go. Full-time is just a benefit for not only the village, but also me as the chief, right? Because now I know we have coverage. One of the big things is you get that phone call on Sunday morning that I'm not gonna be able to work my shift today on a Sunday, right? So that's the hardest.
Manage the merchandise, Mr. Howard's distributed, and took care of Oakland County. I know that when we did that, it was a debacle.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of coordination, and, you know, you have to really have the right people on staff in order to do this. I know that's part of his screening process as he hires. So the police department, I mean, is a perfect example of what type of manpower you would need. So the police department, including their full-time and their part-time hours added together, they have a full-time equivalent of 11. And so that's the same thing NACFA has, to have 2 people on per shift. That's the same thing that would require to have 2 people. And we're required to have 2 fire personnel on shift at a time. So 11 is that magic number.
So if you shifted to that, would then you reduce your numbers of part-time? So would it kind of offset, not completely, but
You would be able
mostly?
you'd be able to decrease your numbers somewhat, and of course your salary line would decrease in the part-time, but it's going to increase
Right.
in the
That-
full-time. So
right.
you're really not going to lose anything there salary-wise.
Right.
The same, you'd want to maintain as many of those part-time positions as you could, so that when you have that major
Right.
structure fire, you have enough callback and you have enough manpower.
Right.
You know, you have to think, when we had the fire downtown a couple of years ago, there were over 200 firefighters on the ground, so that was a pretty immense scene.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would love to have full-time.
Yeah, we have this discussion quite often.
Yeah.
But we also need a truck too, so you have to balance that.
Right.
I thank you for the time, if there's no further questions.
Good.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, so the last portion that we have today are some more of your general fund departments. So Debbie and I will cover those. The first section that you have in your budget is the revenue. And so with the revenue, this year, we're projecting $4,090,000, a little over 171,000. And we're projecting expenditures of $4,088,580. And so that leaves an overage or money going into fund balance of $1,590.50. And so this $4 million, this still is short of what revenues were prior to the last recession, prior to 2010. I mean, none of us were here then in administration, but the village was over $4.5 million in revenue back in that time period. And they said, well, you know, it's going to be 2025, 2026 before you're back to that same level. Well, the reality of it is we're still not back to that same level. We are getting closer. And so that's where we're at. As you look at the revenue, does anybody have any questions as far as revenue numbers?
Yeah. How long does the other marijuana dispensary have to open up? I see that we're looking at $60,000 for the marijuana tax.
Great question. I just had that discussion with them on a phone conference this week, because I told them, I said, you know, you're approaching 2 years, and even though, you know, you've changed operating officers in your board, the fact is the village issued this license or authorized the license 2 years ago. And you know what? We still don't have anything built there. And so as you approach renewal this June, because every year they have to renew, even though they're not operating, they have to renew, so they pay that $5,000. I said, that's not adequate. I said, we want more than just the $5,000, so hold the license. If we authorize 2 licenses, we expect something to be functioning there, and so we're gonna require a concrete plan of what's happening. So they're still shooting. They're currently out for bid for construction of the new building there, and so they say that they're still going to give it their best shot to be open by September of this year, and so we'll see.
Okay.
The trades are very difficult in order to get people scheduled and to get things done, so that's a pretty aggressive timeline in order to get that building completely constructed, you all are hiring and get open. But I expect something a little more concrete for council at least by June, when their license renewal is up.
Now, that place is, their planned project is to be a bit bigger than Loom.
Yes,
And then is there any projection at all possible for what that annual revenue might look like?
well, so we know that for the state of Michigan, they give back a portion of sales tax, right? For marijuana retail that is open. And so in this last year for Loom, the reimbursement or the payment to the village was $59,000. So I don't see sales statewide going down
Okay.
on marijuana. So I think it'll be at least $59,000 if they get open by September. September 30th really is that date that the state uses for calculations.
So you think their sales will be comparable to Loom?
I think
Nothing?
their sales should be comparable,
Okay.
yes. And then, of course, you have the property tax aspect with the new building on site and some other increases that way.
And that 59,000 is not tied to the local sales, it's
No, it's
tied to
statewide.
the state assessed tax.
Okay.
that
So we
is-
want them
that
to
is
do well
distributed-
everywhere.
Right, that is
Okay.
distributed equally to, based on license, number
Okay.
of licenses held.
correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding revenue? Okay, so then if you look at Department 101, that being the village council, you continue to have very modest budget. I'm surprised with your
I wonder
exorbitant pay
why.
rate. But, so that number is still 7447, which is a little bit higher than it was in the previous year, just by a couple of $100. I would say training, you spent $488 or your $500, but there's some excellent training through the MML. And so I would encourage you, you know, even if we have to do some adjustment and increase that line in the future to utilize that training. Some of you have been to some of those trainings already, and so they're worthwhile.
This
In
actually
budget year, we could have new council members, which would, we would always encourage the new ones to go to the MML training the first year.
This reminds me of a question I thought of a while back. Council only gets paid for these meetings right here. We don't get paid for ethics meetings, planning meetings, DDA meetings.
Well, you're in essence salary.
Salary,
So-
okay.
So by charter, you get $900 per year, whether you do 12 meetings or you do 25 meetings.
Okay.
So, you know, it's different. A lot of communities pay per meeting, which probably is a more equitable way of doing it. But yeah, you're in essence salary.
Thank you for that explanation.
And any change on that would have to be approved by the voters, correct?
It would be a charter revision, that's correct.
Sure, yeah,
It was on the ballot a couple
Right,
years
couple
ago,
years
and
ago.
they voted it down.
yeah.
Yeah, but.
Pretty soundly.
Well,
as I
because we're
recall.
greedy and we get too much, clearly.
Yeah, just like everything else that goes up for election on the ballot, I think it's just an educational process. I mean, it's not a very hard argument to say that these positions should be compensated more, particularly if you look at surrounding communities. You know, even Holly Township, I believe their board of trustees is at $3,500 per year.
I think Linden or Fenton, one of them, they're redoing something. Their lawyer is looking into it for them to.
It wouldn't surprise me.
And
This
ours
pays
has
for
been
my
the same
Hulu. It doesn't
since
pay for my
83,
babysitter
right?
for these meetings.
1983,
Yes.
our wages were established and haven't changed.
That's before I was born.
Thank you for that, Ryan. For those of us that had already graduated high school. But yeah, so village council, that's your number.
I thought it was
Do you have any
85.
questions regarding that,
Pardon me?
village council budget?
Yes.
Do you have any questions?
No.
Next category is Department 172, that's the village manager. And so my budget has remained the same. And you'll remember as you look at this that it lists a salary of $48,163, but my salary is split between various departments where I function. So just keep that in mind, that that spreads across those. Any questions regarding the manager's budget? So Brian did Parks and Rec, Department 208, and Department 209 Cemetery. Department 210 is the attorney. This covers Mr. Gildner's funds that we pay him, as well as labor attorney, which is Gary Sachatel from Keller Toma. And so we will be using labor attorney a little more this year than we have in the past because we have the open union contract. And so she attends all, well, not the preliminary negotiation, the opening round, but after that, she will attend each of those. And then, of course, she's available throughout the year if any of the department heads have an issue within the department, which they need her advice or counseling. So when we first began here at the village, Mr. Gildner was covered under a retainer, and we removed that retainer clause, and so we pay by the hour. And the retainer actually was more than what we currently spend. So, I mean, I think that was a good move. Department 250 building fund, we have already covered. Department 258 is data processing. And I'll let Debbie cover that, there's not much there.
That's just for our IT service, replacing computers, repairing computers, different.
Like
things for our
softwares and stuff.
server, yeah, to update things.
Does this count our website maintenance?
No, that's not in that.
Oh, thank you, okay.
We'll get to that though.
Any questions in that area?
The next one is the clerk treasurer budget. It's pretty much the same, other than contractual increases. We pretty much stayed at the same level. Any questions on that budget? The next one is building and grounds. Brian's already covered that. Police department and dispatch were both already covered. Fire department, the reason I listed all of these again in this packet is so you had a overview of the entire general fund. Because when we get to the end where we're comparing revenue to expenditures, I didn't want expenditures to look crazy because I didn't include all these other departments that we already talked about. So they're included twice, but just for the comparison at the end. The next one we have is community development. That is the line that we pay our commissioners out of. We do our training of commissioners, plan review when we build a developer. We pay Row out of this line, and then I bill the developer to reimburse us. I put our CDGB expenses in there. We also have a CDGB revenue line that they match. So, but I bill them under here and then we get reimbursed for them. Any questions on community development? Public works we covered. The last one is non-departmental. That is where the website is. Our non-departmental department is basically for things that are not specifically one department. They're covered by all departments. Like some of the supplies that we buy for all the departments, like I order paper, but everybody uses it. You know, the chiefs will come down and get a case of paper for they don't order it individually. So we order it under non-departmental because it's spread out over everyone. That's also where our website is because it is spread out over everyone. It's under our contractual.
Is retiree health care new as of 23-24?
That is where the line that my audit has me use to back out, because we only have right now one retiree that we're paying healthcare for, and he reimburses us 50%. So we pay him out of that, and then I back it out to charge it to our investment account that is retiree healthcare.
But that is one change that we've had over the last set of contract negotiations, is in all departments except the police department, and we hope to address that again next year when they negotiate, is we have gone away from providing retiree health care to individuals to establishing HSAs, healthcare savings accounts. Many of you may have those in your place of employment or know of those. And really, I think that that's better for the village because it eliminates that legacy cost as far as having to maintain that money to fund that, where we can do it as we go. And again, we partner with the employee in order to encourage them to participate, we allow them to match a little bit as we go. So, so this HCSA, that's something that we, you know, we've gone into. So that completes what we had hoped to cover this morning. Does anybody have any questions at all?
Oh, we have a question from the audience.
Thank you for having me, so we're, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you guys. I want to know, and I'm going down the list, Brian, how many, do you happen to know how many plots are left in the cemetery?
We have, I believe, 3 undeveloped or plotted out areas still. And then there's probably roughly a whole section left. There's 2 more sections, and there's probably a whole section left there. There's usually 8 graves in a section. So depending on, because every section is a different size because it goes around road and stuff like that. But I say we've got a lot of room left.
Okay. Do you know if the prices of the plots have gone up or they've stayed the same?
We've raised them one time in 14 years, and it's currently $600 for a full grade, and then I believe it's $450 for a baby grade. So yeah, they've only been raised once in 14 years.
Okay, all right. Chief Narsh, your bulletproof vests, now, are those paid for by the officers?
No.
Okay. I know that fiber, after so many years, breaks down. They don't get any kind of allowance through anything extra if it breaks down a lot faster, I should say.
Well, there's industry standard is 5 years
Okay.
on a vest. So when I first arrived, in 19, we were kind of in bad shape on that. And the cool thing was we had a citizen, so I was having some conversation at lunchtime. And a citizen came in and he says, you know what, I want to fix that. And he donated, which was very cool. I had about 6 or 7 officers that we needed them right away, so we got those taken care of. Then through the manager and the clerk, over the next couple of years, we budgeted in the additionals to get everybody up to that current standard. So right now, and I roll that in, so I keep a 5-year plan of all the officers as to where they are. So I roll that into the uniform allowance. I have 2 different ones. Yeah. So everybody right now in the department is current in their body armor. They're current to standard, and I don't have really anybody in this budget that's required. So.
Also, I know that they have to go through training. They have to do a lot of practicing. Now, is the ammo, because ammo prices have gone way up, is that in your budget? Do they have to go and pay for their own for doing the training or the practicing that they have to go through?
Well, you are certainly correct on your price increases. Ammunition is crazy. No, there are no costs to employees for training, and there's 2 reasons. One is if an employee said, well, I can't afford it, so therefore I'm not going to do training. We have certain federal and state required mandates on training under Michigan legal standards. So we exceed that. The other is that we have to maintain a certain type of ammunition and a certain, so therefore we have control. And everybody is required to qualify on our schedule. We pay for that completely, and it's in the budget.
All right. I want to thank you for having these budget meetings. This will help with our planning commission because we are doing a capital improvement plan for community. Or is it community?
Okay, capital improvement.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, I was right. Capital improvement plan. So this will help with different things that we can see the budget, and then with the next time we're seeing everything else, and that will just help us. And then with your input from the management on what is truly that we can possibly do, or put it in the long run plans for the next 5 years or so. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. Anything else from council before we adjourn? Or staff?
I would like to address Jerry. I've been listening to the last 2 months of meetings, and was it all the meeting that the money that was set aside for hire has, I wanted to know if that budget is being or
Well, so that's a council decision. So Haya, as you know, I think Ms. Brandon read a request or a letter from Haya in the past regarding a request for funding. They were funded through CDBG, and I know that that's not their preferred method of funding because there are stipulations on how it can be spent. Personally, I'm not sure that's a bad thing to have a stipulation on how things can be spent. I can tell you, previous councils did not allocate money separate from CDBG because they felt that with the fact that Haya maintained a fund balance of their own and they distributed Christmas bonuses, which, I mean, everybody likes a Christmas bonus. I think that their feeling was that it shouldn't be, or shouldn't come from tax dollars. I mean, certainly we don't do Christmas bonuses to our employees through tax dollars, and that's why they didn't do it. So, I mean, it's not included in this budget. I mean, if council wants to include it in this budget, I think you have to look at a couple of things. You have to think about what are you going to do then in future CDBG? Do you not allocate that money? And then, like I said, right now, we are projecting $1,590 in revenue over expenditures. And I think you just need to look at where you're going to take that amount from that you're going to allocate to it. So it's not included in this budget at this time. That's purely a council decision.
I spoke to Mr. Coolis, the township supervisor, and he said that he was facing some similar requests, and that that board was waiting for a transparent budget itemized request, and that was kind of their main issue with just kind of they aren't saying no to them, they're just saying when you come with this, then we can consider it. So I don't know what's appropriate to hear and defer to the president and staff, of course. But I think it's something that we could look into more to see what is appropriate, if we're doing enough or not, Paul.
I know I have asked for this to be added back into the budget for at least 4 years. We, in years past, prior to the recession, were contributing roughly $3,500, which I haven't seen any documents that explain that, but as a participating municipality, that was supposed to be a standard annual budget item.
And I think you do that through CDBG. The allocation is $3,500. That's what they received this year from CDBG.
But
So
that's only if we choose them, right?
Only if you
Right.
choose it, that's
Right.
correct.
And there are typically, I would say, would we say
About every other year.
3 or 4 applicants per year?
Yeah, we have 3 or 4, and usually
Yeah.
you guys pick Haya about every other year.
Right.
If what Mr. Kinnaman said, I'm sorry, if we kind of signed a contract or made a verbal agreement to do an annual fee, then I think that this should be approached separately, and it could go under the annual dues item line.
It could, it was.
Or contractual.
It was
Or contractual,
discontinued.
yeah.
It was discontinued prior to 2010 due to, financial reasons. The money just was not there.
Mhm.
So,
Which, is there an appropriate subcommittee to review this?
you are the committee.
Just me? I'm not smart enough, I don't know.
No, I mean,
I passed the hat.
That's the person's.
I would maybe like to see that agreement that was established initially with Haya in order to know what our obligation really is.
I think that's a good place to start too.
Sure, we can obtain that and forward that to council.
And then if we had terminated it because we were broke, maybe it's time to renew it instead of just accepting services on good faith and maybe not paying them as much as they feel is appropriate.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the reasons that we didn't choose Haya every year was because they had leftover revenue in their balance.
That's correct.
And that's why we didn't go with them every year, because they already had a surplus.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, we will get that agreement and forward to you.
Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Anything else from council?
I would just like to acknowledge that today is the walk out of darkness and that my thoughts are with everyone that's there.
Mm. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
It's also 420 and there's a.
I was gonna say, I couldn't say anything.
That's
They
why,
notified me there's gonna be a big celebration.
Let's get some more tax revenue.
that's why we have donuts today.
Are the Girl Scouts there again?
I hope so, they're smart.
Now, Loon administration emailed me.
Of course.
did you
All right,
adjourn
so,
it?
not yet. Our next session will be next Saturday, April 27th, beginning at 9 a.m.
And we are planning
Oh,
to
yes.
be at the new building.
Oh, okay, okay.
Excellent. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Next Saturday. Got it. At,
They emailed me.
okay, Debbie.
She's working on boosting those.